One of the problems with the way that Christians often approach Scripture is that we kind of see it as this collection of disconnected truths, and we can kind of pick one out to apply it to our lives in kind of a way that Philip Yancey once called moral McNuggets. But the thing about what the Scripture is actually trying to do is that the Scripture describes the contours of reality. It gives us the grand story of the world from beginning to the new beginning, from the heavens and earth to the new heavens and new earth. And basically what it's trying to tell us is this is the world you live in. This isn't what's true for Christians and not for anybody else. This is actually what is true about life in the world. There's different ways to tell that story. One of the most helpful ways that I know of is in a 4-chapter way: creation, fall, redemption, restoration. All good stories have a beginning, something goes wrong, that problem is confronted and fixed, and then you have a culmination. That's exactly where the biblical story, how the biblical story works. In fact, all good stories are good stories because of how the biblical story works. The first chapter is creation. This world's not accidental. This world's not purposeless. The world was designed and made the way it was because of God's created intent. It tells us what God intended for humans and human relationships. The second chapter, the fall, says, well, humans didn't fulfill that intent. Humans who were given stewardship over the creation didn't do it the way that God wanted them to, and so things went wrong. Sin entered into the world. Death became part of the story. Relationships were fractured. Relationships with God, relationships with each other, relationships with the creation itself. But the third chapter is initiated almost immediately in the biblical story, and that's the chapter of redemption, that God is going to send a rescuer. And this tells us something very important about the human condition, which is we can't fix ourselves. Many stories out there, many other competing worldviews will say that the solution is, people getting smarter or more technologically astute or just being nicer and kinder to each other. The Bible has no illusions about the human condition. We can't fix ourselves. That's why Christ came. But what Christ accomplishes is not just to save humans from sin. It's to save the cosmos from the human effects of sin. So what we have in that final chapter, the restoration chapter, and of course there are different views about how the end times are going to come, but what we can all agree on is what Jesus himself said, according to John in Revelation, which is, "Behold, I am making all things new." So what you have in the biblical story is that the scope of restoration and the scope of redemption is just as wide and just as holistic as the scope of creation and fall. And this is the world we live in.